another Lightroom tutorial, guys, and we've got an image sent in by Josh here, so you guys can go give him a follow down in the description. His links will be down there. Switzerland, looking for a new van, and he's got his presets available at his website, so I'll be putting a link to that as well down in the description if you happen to like his feed that we'll look at. So coming down, you can see he mostly uses the natural colors. Sometimes it's very warm and sometimes it's very cool, and as we come down we are going to be working with this image right here, trying to recreate it. So let's get into Lightroom. Image from his Instagram and an unedited raw file. So I'll just brighten it up so you guys can see what it looks unedited. And I've already cropped it into position. So quite a bit of cropping. This was taken on a 5D Mark IV Canon. So getting into this, going to slightly bring up some exposure. I think there's quite a bit of whites. Temperature, so we've got this really warm looking grass, and you can even see that there's warm colors in the shadows if you look closely in there. So what I'm going to do is really bring up the warmth. I'm going to bring this tint down to more of a green. So we're looking too green at the moment, but we will take care of it. Clarity, bit in there. Bring up some vibrance. Right, so RGB curves, gonna add some contrast in with the curves, and then we'll have to add in that fade into the shadows. So just using the, not really going after a color scheme, pretty much just getting a little bit of contrast in there with these curves, and then using the other curve as just a fade. So here's the before and after of just those RGB curves. Bit of contrast in there, and we've got this really goldish looking green, and when we desaturate it, it should look along the lines. It's not too far off. It's warm and it's a tad green, so we'll fix up the colors later, but we've added in a bit of contrast in there, and that gives this curve the fade. Okay, so that's that. So as you can see, a pretty strong fade in those shadows, and then got to make sure you bring these shadows down a little and really fade those blacks. So going to move on. I want to add in a bit of a vignette before we do the colors. Midpoint, not much of a shift, very faintly, and a little bit of grain. pretty hard to see. And then really rough it. We'll try zooming in and adjusting the grain. Pretty difficult to see that small. So moving on, I'm going to do some split toning. So in the shadows it's very warm. So I'm going to put, and quite a few of his other images had quite warm shadows as well. So we need to get a bit more of a golden color as well to our greens, so that will help. We'll cool off the highlights a bit with some blues. And then this balance thing, so all the blues are now in the shadows, all the reds are now in the highlights. So you might want to just put in opposite colors and then try to find your balance. And I might just move it a bit further this way, as I think it's a bit too warm in the mountains if we left it in the middle. So, looking good. Sharpening. He has pretty creamy looking images, which I really like, so not too much sharpening. And we're going to mess around with camera calibration. Maybe a touch more green. Right, and the next thing I need to do, so you can see there's a real shine to all of these highlights. So how does it get that? You might think it's the whites, but then all these bits are just too bright. So I don't think it's that. It's not here. That doesn't do much to affect it. So it is the luminance. So what I'm going to do is bring up the green luminance to get that shine in the grass. And that should leave the sky alone for the most part. Do the same with the yellows, because yellows affect greens a lot. They're pretty much the same color sometimes. So I'm going to bring them up. Right, so as you can see, we need a bit more maybe warm tones to our greens. Shifting them across. Do a bit of yellows as well. And this is pretty tricky because it could be yellows this far and greens only a little bit, or the other way around. But I think about there. Just trying to bring out the orange in that building there. and then we need to desaturate. Right, looking not too bad. So now you want to think about filters and brushes and how to bring a bit more out of the image. So one thing I would maybe do, and what looks a little different, is I want to bring a little more detail out of those mountains. So I'm going to grab a filter. And what I might do is just slightly drop the blacks, and that will just bring out a bit more of the edges and shadows. And then I'm going to also drop the temperature a bit. The temperature in the landscape looks good, but and I'm thinking I might just brush a little bit of brightness to the foreground. So grab your brush, I'm just going to bring up the whites a bit. Right, pretty happy with that. I think I want to just drop the blacks a little. I think it's a little darker in the darker areas. So about there. And I think we need a little bit more color. I bring up the green saturation. To maybe about there. So here's our before and after. Pretty close. I don't see too much different at the moment, but I'm just gonna leave it there, guys. So comment down below who you guys want to see, and make sure they don't have too many followers. That way I can reach out to them. They can send in a photo and I can do a tutorial on them. So yeah, comment down below who you want to see, leave a like, and I'll see you guys in the next one.